Even if you think you're definitely going back, sometimes it doesn't happen that way. Something important happens postpartum. Your priorities may shift. Your capacity may feel different. Your baby's needs may surprise you. Your recovery may be more complex than expected. Your baby's recovery may be more complex than expected. It is common for a lot of women to feel differently after they give birth, so much so that they consider whether or not they want to go back to work. Welcome to Fourth Trimester Voices, the podcast where we delve deep into the fourth trimester. I'm your host, Dr. Choa. Today we're talking about something that is real. Almost everybody talks about planning the nursery. They talk about strollers. You're talking about choosing pediatrician, talking about birth teams. But a very few percentage of women are preparing for their job postpartum. And whether you plan to return to work, take extended time off, or you're just quietly wondering if you might not want to go back to work, this conversation really matters. Because postpartum is not just about the baby, it's not just about your body or your recovery, but it's also about work. It's about you as an entire human being. And that is just not you in the physical, mental, and emotional, but it also involves your surroundings. There is a real transition that is happening. And for many women, it is a professional identity transition. So today we're going to talk about how to prepare for your job during this transition, but really you have to start when you are pregnant. Even before you're pregnant, I would say for a lot of people. And the reason why you want to do it so early is because you want to make sure that your mind is clear, that you're making a decision with a clear brain, because postpartum is full of lots of different emotions, and you don't want to make any major decisions during this time. Now, it does happen, but you definitely want to plan in advance. This episode is for every mom, whether you love your job, whether you hate your job, whether you are a stay-at-home mom, whether you are a primary breadwinner, whether you are just unsure and you just want to listen in. Everybody is welcome to this conversation. So I want to share what my experience was. I was working probably about 16 to 20 shifts before I had a child. To me, that wasn't that many because in residency, I was working 22, 23 shifts. So when I got a job and they're giving me 16 to 18 shifts, I'm like, bring it on. Not a big deal. Then I got pregnant with my first pregnancy and I worked myself to the ground. Ended up having a miscarriage. I worked through that miscarriage and really regretted doing that. And then when I got pregnant with my now daughter, I was definitely more cognizant of how much I was working during that time, but I was still putting in a good amount of shifts. But as soon as I had that child, let me tell you, I was really struggling with my transition back to work. I initially thought I would just go in and do night shift because all my colleagues were saying, when you do night shift as a mom, it honestly is a really good decision. It makes everything easier. Just go to night shift. So I went in doing night shifts and I picked up 12 night shifts a month thinking, this is definitely easier than 16. That was terrible, right? I worked 12 night shifts. Every night shift, I would come home. I would hear my daughter cry. I was not sleeping at all. I subsequently went through many more transitions after that. I only lasted 6 months during night shift. Then I cut down my shifts to 10 shifts per month without predictability. I picked up an administrative job thinking that would be the best course of action. And honestly, after 3 years postpartum, I decided to transition all the more together. And I know I'm not the only one who has this transition after work, but it took me a really long time to get there. And I would say I did not know what type of a person I was going to be. I thought I was going to be one of those moms pushing their stroller when the baby is 2 weeks. No, I had terrible anxiety, terrible depression. I did not leave my house for months. And so my work transition returning was a really difficult one. I do wish I would have thought about it a little bit during pregnancy or at least planned financially, but my mind was not there because I had an idea of what type of mom I was going to be. And I know that's you too. You're thinking, I'm going to be all over the place, working out, exercising, running marathons with my child. I think that's a good goal to set, but I think you have to be open and I think you have to plan for the what ifs. Okay, let's get into it. We know that postpartum is a vulnerable time. Sleep deprivation alters your cognition. Hormonal shifts are going to alter your mood and emotional regulation. Physical recovery is going to require energy. Decision making is going to be hard. Boundary setting is going to be hard. Advocating for yourself is going to be hard. This is just biology. After delivery, you are going to be healing. You're going to be recovering. You're going to be planning to feed, learning how to feed a newborn. There's a lot that you're going to be doing postpartum. So I advocate for you to start this transition now. You're going to need to start this transition now. So, what does planning for your job actually entail? What does it mean? It's so many layers, including when to tell your job that you're pregnant. It includes meeting with HR. It includes really just preparing your finances for getting pregnant. Preparing your job for your pregnancy and postpartum does not mean that you need to decide today when you're coming back after postpartum. It doesn't mean that because you don't know how your postpartum is going to be. And so you're not going to be able to figure that out right away. Preparing your job means gathering information early while you still have energy, while you still have clarity, while you still have leverage. One of the first questions that moms ask me is, when should I tell my job that I am pregnant? The honest answer to this is there really isn't a single time. There isn't a right time. Some women wait until after the first trimester, especially if it's a new job. They just don't really want to tell people this. Some women wait until they're actually showing when they have to have these conversations. Some are going to tell their job because they're having morning sickness. So they're having to miss work because they're vomiting every single day at home, or they're tired, or they have to go to certain medical appointments that are unavoidable. What matters more than when you tell someone that you're pregnant is how you do it. This is when the planning starts. Talking to HR early is not being dramatic, it's being strategic. Once your pregnancy is known, especially if you are a shift worker, an hourly worker, or in a physically demanding role, it is a reasonable request to have a dedicated conversation with HR. It's not really to announce decisions. It's not really to negotiate your worth, but it's to understand the system that you are working up against. So you don't have to tell them that you're pregnant, but you need to have conversations about if you get pregnant. So it's always good to start early. Some questions or things that you need to understand is FMLA. What is leave beyond FMLA? What does my FMLA cover? Is it paid? What leave am I entitled to? How much of that leave is protected? When does FMLA actually start counting? So my mind was blown because I actually left work early. I was having preterm contractions. So I was having contractions before my baby was actually born. And so I had to leave work about 3 or 4 weeks early before my leave began. And that counted as FMLA, and total FMLA that I was entitled to was 12 weeks. That 4 weeks during my pregnancy counted towards my 12 weeks FMLA. That means that after I had my baby, I only had 8 weeks of FMLA. So I didn't realize that until afterwards. And so I had to end up asking for permission for my chair to have additional weeks, which were all unpaid. So I had 6 weeks of unpaid FMLA plus an additional 4 weeks of unpaid. So I had 10 weeks of unpaid leave postpartum that I did not know about until postpartum. So I don't want that for you. So talking to HR is really important to really determining, when does FMLA count? If I leave early, does that count? Do I still get my 12 weeks postpartum, or is it now cut short? And can I request more? And what does that look like? Is it paid? Do I have to use disability insurance? What does that look like? If you're a shift worker, your HR department may say, let's add an additional shift every month during your pregnancy so that when you go out, you have all of those weeks paid. You can work at the end of the year or after you return back to work an extra shift to cover for these shifts being paid. HR can get really creative, and so knowing what you're working with early can help you plan. Now, a lot of women make a lot of assumptions about FMLA, about disability, but they're all assumptions. And listening to your friends or colleagues, it may be a different story for them. And so you really want to talk to your department early and have these conversations. And you can just say, hey, I'm just planning to get pregnant. I will say that one thing that a lot of people end up doing after giving birth is using their vacation or their sick leave. And honestly, I would not do that while you're pregnant. I would save these as long as you can for those hours postpartum when you can't really come back, because a lot of these are directly going to affect your financial planning. Pregnancy is the right time to ask all of these questions to HR, not during your postpartum. All right, so when you talk to HR, you're going to talk to them about your FMLA. You're going to talk to them if you can use disability insurance to cover some of your postpartum. You're going to talk about what is paid and what is unpaid leave. You're going to talk about, if you leave your job early, does that count towards your FMLA? And then you are going to talk about health insurance and health benefits. You want clarity on benefits. Does your health insurance cover you when you are on leave? What happens if your leave is unpaid? Do you need to make manual health insurance payments? What happens if plans change while you are postpartum? These are a lot of stressors for a lot of people when they're not planned for. So these are questions that you're going to need to ask your HR department. Preparing your job means understanding expectations. So you've now sat down and you've talked to HR about your benefits. You've talked to them about your insurance, your FMLA, your leave, your disability, all of that. Now you are going to have conversations with your boss. Again, they don't need to know that you're pregnant. You may have a hypothetical conversation with them. But when you decide to talk with your job, you need to understand expectations. Who is going to cover your responsibilities when you are gone? Is there a handoff plan? Are you expected to check your email? I had one mom who was postpartum, but she was on email duty. She was at home postpartum, but she had to check her emails. Are you expected to be reachable even though you are nursing your child? What does leave actually mean in your workplace? Because leave that is interrupted constantly is not rest. When you're thinking about emails, when you're on call, that is not rest. Phased return is an option for some people. So you're off for maybe 6 weeks or 8 weeks, and then you come back on email or home duty. Then you come back on fewer number of shifts, or maybe 2 days a week, then 3 days a week. It is the time to ask. Now is the time to ask when you're pregnant or before you have a child. But you just want to understand if it exists. So when that time comes, you may have planned accordingly. And I want to just repeat something. Just because you've had these conversations with HR or your boss and you've planned, it doesn't mean that's exactly what is happening. You're not making any promises. I want to emphasize this. Planning is not commitment. Planning is not promising. Planning is not deciding to your future self or your future choices. Planning is protecting your options. It allows you to make postpartum decisions from a place of clarity instead of pressure. It does not mean that these things actually have to come to fruition. Let's move on to our next section. Even if you think you're definitely going back, sometimes it doesn't happen that way. Many women enter pregnancy absolutely certain that they are going to return to work, whether that job or another job. And that is completely valid. But something important happens postpartum. Your priorities may shift. Your capacity may feel different. Your baby's needs may surprise you. Your recovery may be more complex than expected. Your baby's recovery may be more complex than expected. It is common for a lot of women to feel differently after they give birth, so much so that they consider whether or not they want to go back to work. This is not instability. This is lived experience. If you've listened to my show and you've listened to some of the guests that have come on, a lot of them have had different transitions after they give birth. One of my guests who was a physician, she had a child with special needs, and so she couldn't go back and do her surgical residency. So she pivoted. She decided to go into business to allow for the flexibility to be able to care for her child. Even if you are confident that you are going back, you need to give yourself room to change. You need to give yourself room to change your mind. You are allowed to gather information without signaling uncertainty. You are allowed to plan for multiple outcomes. You're allowed to evolve. Planning for the possibility that you may not be the same is not abnormal. It's very possible. Here's another situation that sometimes happens. You may need to plan for the possibility that your job is not there. We know it's illegal to fire moms in the postpartum period, but the reality is there are a lot of people who have been laid off in the postpartum period. I don't know what loopholes these jobs are jumping to make this happen, but it has happened time and time again. What if this happens? Also, what happens if you just don't want to go back? Does it mean that you're ungrateful? Does it mean that you lack ambition? Does it mean that you've wasted your education? Does it mean that you are an absolute failure? No. Postpartum reveals what is most important: your baby, your mental capacity, your physical recovery. Those things are important. And sometimes it reveals a misalignment that was there. You've always known that job was toxic. You've always known that boss was toxic. But now you have a different capacity to carry this. Being postpartum with a toxic job environment, being postpartum with a toxic boss, that is misalignment. And sometimes postpartum is the tip over the edge that you are already standing on. And sometimes that leads to you quitting your job. Sometimes that leads to you not going back. Knowing this about yourself is the time when you should be planning. Plan for this in pregnancy. Plan for this before you give birth. Why? Jobs give you finances. If you don't have that job, you don't have financial means to do the things that you want to do. So start stacking early. You know you hate that job. You know you hate that job. Maybe remove some of the luxuries that you do. So you spend $200 on Starbucks every day. Let's not do that anymore. So you like to take elaborate trips 6 times a year. Maybe let's not do that anymore. Plan. Plan. Explore what part-time looks like. Explore what per diem or contract job looks like, not because you've decided to quit, but because you deserve to make a decision that is not panicked, right? That is planned for. Now, if you fully decide that you want to return, but you know that your environment is toxic, maybe negotiate different roles. Maybe change leadership positions. So you were overseeing 5 different departments. Let's see if you can oversee maybe one. Let's make sure that maybe you work 2 days a week, maybe not even 5. It is okay for you to say that you may not want to go back. You may not like your job. You may not want to do this leadership position anymore. You may not want the responsibility of doing administrative things. All of these things are okay to say out loud, but let's plan for it. Now, let's talk about when you get fired or that job is not there. When you're pregnant, you're not thinking about that, but you're listening to this podcast. So I want you to plan for that. Stack money because these jobs, they're not loyal. They say they support your pregnancy. They say they support your postpartum, but they are not loyal. So before you even get pregnant, or if you're in early pregnancy, I want you to stack money. Stack money. I want you to start updating your resume, making sure your CV is on point, exploring your other options, maintaining professional relationships that you've had elsewhere. I want you to make sure that you are not going to be in a position where you do not have a job and you do not have money. We're not going to do that. We don't want to be blindsided postpartum. We don't want to be blindsided by financial instability when that matters the most, because you're going to need to spend money on your baby and yourself. I want you to prepare for multiple outcomes. I want you to expect the worst. I want you to think about what it looks like if you don't return, what it looks like if you get fired, what it looks like if you change positions. You don't owe anybody certainty during your season of healing. You owe it to yourself to protect, to prepare, and to protect yourself and your finances. Work is not just income. We talked about how to plan for your finances, how to plan for the job change, all of those things. But I also want you to plan for your identity shifting. For a lot of women, your job has been your identity, how you define yourself. It has been your community. It has been proof of competence. It has been proof of independence, of intellectual stimulation. So whether you return or not, whether you return differently, for a lot of women, there's going to be grief associated with that. You are going to grieve the person that you were before you had a baby. Man, I used to be I was the most productive. I was top employee of the year. I ran 6 departments. Now I can't even get out of bed. Now I'm dreading going to work. There's going to be a lot of grief associated with that. If you do not return to work or you return part-time, you're going to grieve that professional version of yourself. If you reduce your hours, you're going to feel like you're living between worlds. Grief can exist with the relief that you feel from stepping back. You can miss your career, but love being at home with your baby. You can love your job, but resent going into work every day, resent the pressure. You can feel grateful, but overwhelmed at the same time. Your worth is not measured by your productivity. Your value does not decrease because your priorities have changed. Please remember that. I want to talk about some red flags that are going to basically predict your postpartum burnout. Really, it has to do with your work environment. Toxic environments show up way before you get pregnant. They show up during pregnancy. And so you're going to have to identify that. Some workplace dynamics need attention. Some work environments are just not understanding. They're not supportive. They are toxic to you. They are toxic to your pregnancy. They are toxic to your postpartum health. This hostility sometimes is not overtly visible, but it may show up as being dismissed, being silenced, being given unrealistic expectations. Here's some red flags that you're going to need to pay attention to. Number one, the pressure to stay available during leave. Just take some emails. Just answer a few calls. Number two, comments that minimize your physical recovery. You're good. You've literally had a baby already. Like, you are pregnant. You're not disabled. I remember someone used to say that. You're pregnant. Pregnant is not a disability. Listen to those words. If your job says things like that, pregnancy is not a disability. You are not disabled. That's a red flag. Jokes about how quickly wife bounced back. Natalie was back within 2 weeks after giving birth. She was answering emails. Julie, she picked it right up. She was back right away. Proactive conversations are not there about breastfeeding or pumping. Maybe you're trying to ask questions about, where will I pump when I'm on this job? How much time is allotted for me to go pumping? How often can I go and pump? I remember my old job, they didn't have a dedicated space. So nobody could answer those questions for you. You have to just figure it out. That's a red flag. Not having a designed pumping space, that's a problem. Rigid schedule that doesn't even allow you to go and pump. No lunch break, no reasonable accommodation. Subtle messaging that your role is replaceable. This is nothing about you. This is about your toxic workspace. And you got to figure this out early while you're pregnant, because it's going to be a problem postpartum. And what ends up happening to a lot of women is they go back to these spaces, these toxic workspaces, and they cannot survive. And they end up leaving. And oftentimes, not because they hate that career or hate that job, but that environment is toxic and it does not allow them to transition in their postpartum period properly. If your workplace has not initiated conversations about support during your postpartum recovery, assume there is no support. Ask these questions. Is there space available for me? How often are breaks allowed? Does coverage exist for me? What documentation is required? Breastfeeding is not a personal preference. It's a choice, and your job needs to have reasonable accommodations for pumping. This is a medical and biological process that requires structural support, not winging it. The same applies for recovery. Postpartum healing is not something you power through. It requires structural support. Ignoring recovery has real implications, even for your job, because you're going to injure yourself. You're going to be prone for infection. You're going to slip into postpartum depression. And then guess what? You're not coming back to work. There's missed days of work. There's missed productivity. Your job is going to lose money. So you have to have these conversations. Pregnancy is the time to see red flags. Pregnancy is the time to ask questions. Pregnancy is the time to clarify boundaries. It's the time to request documentation and accommodations if needed, not postpartum. Because once you are sleep deprived, oh my goodness, conversations is going to be hard. Once you are going through physical healing and recovery, it's going to be really difficult. And a toxic environment is not going to allow for those conversations. Naming these dynamics is not being negative. It is being informed. And being informed is part of protecting your health. All right. Some of you may say, I don't go to work. I'm just a stay-at-home mom. First of all, not just a stay-at-home mom. Some of you may say, I am the breadwinner. I do all of the heavy lifting. So I don't know if I have these options because my husband maybe is a stay-at-home dad, or he doesn't work, or it's just me. This conversation is not just for corporate professionals. This is for even you, mom, if you are a stay-at-home mom, because when you are down, things around the house don't happen. If you're homeschooling your child, that may not happen. So all of this planning applies to you as well. Work is a transition, no matter what type of work you do. It changes financial dynamics. It changes dynamics within your home, social dynamics. It changes your daily structure. It changes your identity. It changes power dynamics within the relationship. All of these deserve thought and conversation before exhaustion sets in. Preparing your job for postpartum is not about productivity. It's about your health. It's about your autonomy. It's about your identity. It's about giving your future self options, whether you want to stay at home or whether you want to go back to work. You do not have to know exactly who you're going to be in the postpartum period, and you don't even have to choose. You just need to give yourself the space to choose thoughtfully. Pregnancy, or even before you're pregnant, is the time to gather information. Postpartum is the time to heal. If this episode resonated with you, I want you to I want you to share it with a friend. I want you to post it in a group, because trust and believe, one of your friends, one of your coworkers needs to hear this. Moms deserve support. Moms deserve clarity. Moms deserve options. All right. I'd love to see you next episode. Take care. Oh, yes. If you are looking to get more information about how you plan and prepare for the postpartum, you can book a session with me. I do coaching sessions for mom. I do postpartum planning sessions, and we can talk through these transitions and how to plan for it, whether it is financially, socially, mentally, all of those things. And if you just don't have the time to plan or sit down and have a session with me, you can take my course, which is What to Expect Next, Your Fourth Trimester Blueprint. All of this information you can get through one of my links on Instagram. Just follow me on Instagram at Dr. Choa. Okay. Follow me at Dr. Choa. Or you can go to my course website, which also has some of my coaching sessions. And that is courses.drchoa.com. All right, Mom, you got this. Take care. I'll see you next time.
My name is Dr. Choa, and it's been lovely talking with you all today. Take care.